Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thanks to the ranking member, thanks to our witnesses, and frankly, many people who've worked literally years to get to this point to have a hearing. The market has been way ahead of this, and frankly, it's been painful to watch, in 2017 and since, when you see the ICO market ripe with people committing fraud or just regulatory arbitrage, taking advantage of the fact that our regulators haven't paid attention to bad actors. And it's been especially frustrating to watch some of our regulators take aim at people that are working very hard and very aggressively to be legitimate businesses, to come into compliance with every kind of licensure and regulatory regime that our country currently offers. It's been woefully inadequate, and so it's so good to get to this point for the hearing. So thank you, and then thanks to my colleagues. I've been very encouraged by the amount of preparation many colleagues have done to close the gap in any knowledge they've had, and over the past few years, the number of members of Congress that really understand this space has certainly increased. 3 years ago, we had a hearing, not really a hearing, because as a junior member, I can't hold those or pick them. In exasperation, we just held a meeting over at the Library of Congress, and some of the folks in this room were there, or representatives from your companies were there. And we came up with the most essential thing was to establish a bright line test, not just for the players in the industry, not just for the investors, but also for the regulators. So that if somebody at the SEC, for example, says this looks like a security, it's not a form of interpretive art to say, does it really fit this test? We came up with 4-part test that said it's already created, it exists, that it is recorded on a distributed, secure, and immutable ledger, that is not controlled by a central authority, that permissionless peer-to-peer transactions can be done without an intermediary, and it does not represent a financial interest in any entity. More important than that particular test is the fact that there is, as Mr. Brooks, you highlighted, a speed limit, so that there's some clear thing, not just, as I say, for the investors, not just for the participants in the market, but for the regulators themselves, so that we have continuity. If only there were such a body that could provide this clarity. My hope is that the next time we have a hearing, we will notice some bills, and we'll be able to talk about particular text towards that. Mr. Brooks, when you look at stable coins, which maybe is the lowest hanging fruit, some of those are established well in long-standing things like New York trusts. Some of those aren't traded in anything. They're just U.S. dollars stored in a vault for every token. Some have U.S. dollars in components of M2, like U.S. Treasuries. Some have other things. When you were at the OCC, you provided some clarity there, and you also dealt, importantly, with self-custody. Mr. Allaire, you mentioned that the code is literally online. Any of us right now, during the hearing, could download code and could begin to self-custody a digital asset. So as you look at that, how important is it to provide this clarity, Mr. Brooks?
Well, specifically on the issue of custody and self-custody, this is a way that crypto tries to make an advance over the current system. So the issue with custodial assets we've seen, and this committee's looked at many, many times. Think about the financial crisis when there was an issue of foreclosures, and it was difficult for custodians to produce the original note that proved whoever was entitled to enforce that transaction and foreclose on a property, because the piece of paper had gone missing or the custodian had merged with another custody company or whatever. One of the things crypto's trying to do is to use technology so that you can safekeep your own assets for free versus having to pay somebody else to custody it. That also provides a layer of financial privacy, something that this committee usually favors, but sometimes, strangely, doesn't favor. So self-custody is one of the key things, along with self-ownership and self-determination on this Internet of Value, that's really critical to the nature of the network.
Yeah, thank you. And as we've digitized information, it's frankly, amazing that we've finally digitized money in a way that we can move not just a store of value, but a means of exchange. The use case for digital assets has partially been that it's this stable store of value. Certainly stable coins solve that. Some have pointed out that Bitcoin, for example, doesn't. And, Mr. Bankman-Fried, one of the ways that people have speculated that the volatility is created in the market isn't by holders of the asset or hodlers, hold on for dear lifers, as has become known in the space, but by the other big group that owns these assets, which are traders. Many of them trade on leverage. And so when you look at leverage, you made a lot of news by saying, we're capping people at 20 times leverage. That's a lot of leverage. But you also pointed out that the average leverage on FTX was around 2x. So could you talk about the importance of leverage in volatility?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. The first thing that I'll say is in cryptocurrencies, in digital assets, as like essentially every other financial asset in the world, more volume trades through futures contracts than through the spot asset. The reason for this is basically it's more economically efficient. It's much more capital efficient. The lack of an immediate delivery requirement on the physical creates a much easier ability for people to hedge exposure, for people to express opinions. And so for all those reasons, I think that they're an important part of the digital asset ecosystem, as they are of every other ecosystem. I'll just briefly say it's important to have robust risk engines that monitor the positions on these assets. We've gone through multiple very large up and down moves and been able to manage positions both times.
Thank you, and thanks again for the hearing. I feel like I've spoken to Steve Case in like 1990, so thanks for the vision that you guys have, and thanks for the hearing, Madam Chairwoman.
You're welcome.